Okay, so if I were to survive the zombie apocalypse, I would go to Hawaii because it's the perfect place to go and start like recolonization. So with storms, while Hawaii does get storms, it allows it for there to be more moisture there, which makes it easier to grow things, and it also keeps the climate a little bit more temperate. Its angle of incidence is described in chapter 4, makes it a warmer area, which allows it for longer periods of time in which I'd be able to grow food and appreciate the outdoors, which would reduce the need to build excessive shelter. The sea breezes also attribute to the nice weather and in the area, which make it a nicer place to live. And the humidity, as described in chapter 6, stays relatively the same year-round, which would reduce any chance of complications from things getting too dry or too wet at some times. The air masses, it keeps it generally warm and wet in the air, which makes it a better climate for growing things, because it is a tropical wet climate. It does have waves that shape the landscape, and that's a lot of what the erosion is with it being an island. Because of the plants on there, there's lots of photosynthesis that occurs, which means more fresh air in the area, is described in chapter 10. In chapter 11, it describes types of animals, and the animals in Hawaii are generally pretty safe, which would make it easier to live there, because you wouldn't really have to worry as much as other things as such in like a place like Australia or places like southern Utah, where animals are typically more dangerous, unless you go into the ocean, where there are a lot of dangerous animals surrounding the area. There are ultisols in the area, which makes it a lot easier to grow food. They're great for growing because they stay relatively moist, and there's also sand that helps with the deposit of excess water as well. There's a lot of volcanic rock around, which gives some beauty to the surroundings. As far as the islands and talking them themselves, it's called the Hawaiian Hotspot, which shows the use of shifting of the ocean floor and plate tectonics, them being away from the islands, and also causing the creation of the islands, because they were created through the volcanoes that are on the islands and surrounding them. As far as temperature change, it stays relatively the same year-round, which makes it a more comfortable climate to live in. It doesn't really get excessively hot or excessively cold in most parts of the area. A lot of issues that might come is flooding through things like tsunamis. However, because of the landscape, you are able to get to higher grounds, which would also keep yourself safe on the islands. There are occasional volcanic eruptions that happen. None of them have been too major. And so there's been a general pattern that you'd be able to follow as you are on the island to know when those things are going to occur. There is sand, obviously, around it, which allows water to come onto the land through things like tsunamis, but also with the sand underneath the island causes it for easier to grow plants and things because it doesn't allow things to be too dry. Glaciers aren't really a big issue just due to the climate in the area, with it being warm and most of the year, so glaciers aren't much of an issue. But a lot of erosion that does happen comes through waves coming in. The tide can make them a lot larger, which could cause more erosion surrounding the coastlines of the islands. So I would go to Hawaii if I survived the zombie apocalypse.